It's time for another episode of the Shaun Tabatt Show, a podcast where I connect you with thought leaders from across the globe, dig into some of my favorite topics like personal development, marketing, spirituality, and pretty much any other shiny object that happens to catch my attention. Today, my special guest is Senator Josh Hawley, and we are going to be discussing his brand new book, Manhood, the Masculine Virtues America Needs. Senator Hawley, it is truly an honor, sir. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. Great to be with you.
Well, truly my pleasure. In my circles, all of us have read your books. We all know who you are, but inevitably somebody's going to watch this or listen to this like, I don't know who this Josh Hawley guy is. So let's kick this off by having you share a bit of the Josh Hawley origin story. For that person, this is their first time meeting you. What are a few things they should know?
Well, I am proudly married to Erin Hawley, who is both the brains and the beauty of our operation. Erin and I have been married for 13 years. We've got 3 beautiful children. My oldest is Elijah, who is 10. My second is Blaze, who is 8. And then my baby girl is Abigail, who's 2 years old. And we've got 1 dog and about to get 2. The big news around our house is we are getting a Labrador puppy who is joining our Australian Kelpie. And that'll be happening here in very short order. So Daddy is enjoying the relative peace and quiet of the household now, which is 0, by the way. My household's many things. Quiet is not one of them. So we're about to add to the chaos. But listen, my life is a story that's one that I'm sure many of your listeners can relate to and maybe grew up with. I grew up in a small town in Missouri, rural Missouri, 4,000 people, very, very small. Grew up in a believing household. My mom and dad are believers, know the Lord, introduced me to the Lord at an early age. I came to know the Lord at a young age and then made a commitment to my life to Christ when I was 12 publicly. And, it's just a life of trying to follow the Lord and being on an incredible adventure where he takes you. And as I say to my boys, man, the best adventure in life is following Jesus. You never know what's going to happen next.
And I'm always curious in terms of career paths. Why did you become a lawyer and then eventually get into politics? There had to be some things that steered you in that direction.
Yeah, well, I mean, partly because I'm no good at math. And so that really directed me towards the law. I'm kidding, kind of kidding. My wife is great at math, so she's a lawyer. So it's proof that you can do both. But no, in all honesty, I really wanted to be able to defend our constitutional rights. And from an early age, I was so interested in American history, in the American Constitution, and American politics as part of all of that. And so I went to law school because I wanted to be a constitutional lawyer. I wanted to be able to defend these rights that our founders fought to give us, that I believe are ultimately based in biblical truth and biblical revelation. And so it was my love for American history and the Constitution. And that's what I did as an attorney. I was a First Amendment attorney primarily, working on religious liberty cases and protecting the rights of churches and congregations and frankly, people of all faith to follow their conscience, to worship. And doing that because I think it's a God-given right, and it's right there in our Constitution, one of our most important rights, if not our most foundational right. And I did that until I ran for office. And then I ran for office a few years ago for the first time. As a lawyer, I ran for attorney general in my state, the chief legal officer of the state. It was a great job. And I just did that because all of these cases have been fighting in court for the First Amendment and for religious liberty. I just came to think, you know what? This battle is huge. If we could get if the state attorneys general would come in on the side of the Constitution, come in on the side of the First Amendment, come in on the side of religious liberty, we could have tremendous effect. And that's really why I ran when I first did.
And in terms of the story behind the book, as an author and a publishing guy, I know on the one hand, every book comes out of kind of a season of life, something that's on your heart, something you have to say. To some degree, it's always kind of interesting to see what you follow up a previous book with. So, why the jump from The Tyranny of Big Tech, which was a very different book than the book on manhood? Why was manhood the next book, the important topic for this stop in your writing journey?
Well, for me personally, it really has to do with being a father. And my boys, who are now 10 and 8, as I said, as they begin to get a little older and enter into their school years and enter into the world of men, so to speak, I've been thinking a lot in recent years about what my responsibilities are as a dad to help them become the men God has called them to be, and how to equip them to deal with a culture, a left-wing culture, honestly, that denigrates men, that denigrates truth, that now denigrates the very idea of male and female. And so the book, at a personal level, grew out of that. At a more policy level, It grew out of my work in working for the people of my state and seeing the number of young men in particular who are struggling with suicide, who are struggling with drug abuse, who are not working. And I'm just increasingly convinced that so many of the problems we face in our country socially could be addressed, if not solved, by having men stand up, take responsibility, get a job, start a family, provide for the people they love. And so the book has that component to it as well.
In terms of a lot of what I think a lot of us could see as root causes of many of the issues we face throughout society, whether it's some of them I think are things that are responsible, some of it are results, but whether it's fatherless homes, lack of work ethic, the whole gamut. Why is there this tendency or this fear in so many parts of culture to actually start peeling back the layers of the onion and be like, oh man, this is probably a root cause, and this could be we looked at the symptoms and we try to medicate the symptoms, but there's this overt fear of not actually getting to the root of what's wrong. Why are people afraid to touch that?
Well, I think a lot of it is for people who are in leadership positions who are empowered, they're a big problem with what's wrong. And I think they don't want to admit that. I think the agenda that they have pushed, the message that they have sent for decades now to men in particular, and it goes something like this, that if you're a man, you are inherently toxic. That if you are a man, you make the world a worse place. That the best thing you can do as a man is to renounce your masculinity, to be passive, to do as you're told, to sit down and shut up. That has been the drumbeat to boys and men in this country for decades, and it's been a disaster. It has been an unmitigated disaster. And I think a lot of people in positions of power, whether that's politics or the media, what have you, they don't want to take responsibility for that. You look at the suicide rate, you look at the drug abuse rate, you look at the depression rate, nobody wants to take responsibility, but we need to tell the truth. And the truth is that all of those things I just said, all of those messages I just identified, those are lies. God made men for a purpose. It's good to be a man. He's got a purpose for men, and we need more men who are willing to stand up and take on that purpose and that responsibility.
One of the things I think we've seen in large the past couple years, well, longer than the past few years, really, is just the twisting of language, redefining of terms. And I feel like a lot of it has happened subtly, and then all of a sudden it feels like it just came on the scene, and people are like, wait, I could talk about this yesterday. Today that is hate speech, or it's inappropriate, or that's not what I thought this to mean at all. I'd love to have you speak to just the power of controlling the language and getting to define what things mean. There has to be a lot of intentionality behind changing the definitions of everything that have been kind of normalized throughout most of our existence.
Well, let's just take male and female, for example, something that I think even 5 years ago, let alone 10, we couldn't have imagined would be controversial. I mean, surely we can agree on the basic biological reality of male and female, but apparently not anymore, according to the radical left. And those people are a distinct minority of the country, those radicals, but they have outsized influence in politics, entertainment, media. So you just look at how language has been abused and twisted there. And I think of my own experience with this. I was sitting in a Senate hearing, it's been about a year ago now, and we had a witness who's very accomplished lawyer, professor of law, accomplished scholar. But I noticed that she wouldn't say the word woman. And by the way, this was a hearing on women's rights, and she wouldn't say the word woman. She kept saying persons with a capacity for pregnancy. And I started keeping track on my little notepad how many times she said it. So it got to be my turn to ask questions. And I said, listen, I just want to start with this. When you say persons with a capacity for pregnancy, do you mean women? And she looked at me and she said, I just want to acknowledge the transphobic nature of your question. And I thought, wow, you talk about an abuse of the language and an attempt to reset the dialogue. You can't now even say woman or man without being accused of transphobia, violence. You know, she later asked me, she said, do you think men can get pregnant? And I said, no, I don't think men can get pregnant. And she said, well, I think positions like yours lead to violence. And I thought, positions like yours are insane. I mean, it is a crazy, crazy attempt to redefine, to your point, our language and our understanding of reality. And that's what we're really dealing with here. I mean, we're dealing with an attempt to redefine reality. And for men out there, young men in particular, one of the reasons that they're so confused is they want to achieve something in life. They want their lives to matter, but they're told from the time they're little that anything they do will only make the world a worse place. And I just think we've got to tell them the truth, which is that, no, we need you to step up and take responsibility. We need you to live in a way that sacrifices for other people. And if you do that, you can change your life and you can leave a legacy.
Well, I think it'd be an understatement to say that we do indeed live in some chaotic times. I can say, as a guy who came up through a bunch of different software companies where you get bought and sold and it's chaotic all the time, you can often make some great leaps with changes in a culture because there is a certain momentum, good or bad, to chaos. Is there an opportunity for us in culture, even though times are chaotic? There is momentum, there is energy. Can we harness that in a good direction?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, and this is we have to, and this is particularly our hope as believers, is that we know that ultimately there's a Lord who sits enthroned over all of history and sits enthroned over everything that appears to us to be chaos. And he is capable of using every circumstance for the good. Of course, we have a responsibility in that. Our responsibility is to follow him. Our responsibility for those of us who know the Lord is to serve him and to choose to do that. So are we living in a moment of crisis? We clearly are. Clearly, whether we're talking again about the number of people who are taking their own lives, the number of kids, the number of people who are struggling with depression, or there are larger issues as a society. This is clearly a moment of crisis, but it's also a moment of tremendous opportunity because it's driving us back to the first principles of what we believe together as a society. And as Christians, we have a special opportunity to speak into that, to speak truth, to speak hope, to speak for the future. And I think if we do that, we really have a chance to change the course of our own lives and our families' lives, but also of this nation.
And you and I talked about this briefly before the interview. As I see it, one of the big difficulties in culture right now is people have a lack of identity. They're being told their country is bad, their family of origin is bad, the faith that was normal in their family all their growing up years, that's bad as well. And so we've lost that story to write ourselves into, to know where we've been, to know where we are, to know where we're going. I love that you pull on the thread of God giving Adam kind of roles and assignments in the book of Genesis in different parts of the book. Talk to us a little bit about some of the different roles that God gave to Adam that you bring out in the book that are actually something for us to be aware of and operate in today.
Well, here's the number one role that God gives to Adam. God creates the world. He creates a garden at the center of that world. He puts Adam and Eve in it. And then he charges Adam in particular to care for the garden, but also to expand it. And I think the picture that we see there right in the book of Genesis, right at the very beginning, is God calls men to serve him, to join him in his work, and to help make all the world a garden, to make all the world full of the presence of God, to go out and where there's disorder, to bring order, where there's chaos, to bring beauty. Adam is charged to do that from the very beginning. And in a sense, nothing has changed since then. Men still have that calling, that mission on their lives. And as we live that out, we live into certain roles. We become husbands and fathers and warriors and builders and priests and kings. And I talk about that in the book by just looking at different figures from the Bible who illustrate each of those roles, which is really about living that God-given mission to expand the garden, to bring the presence of God into the world. And I just say for men who feel like, their lives are empty, your life isn't empty. I mean, God created you for a purpose. History has a purpose, and you can be part of it. In fact, we live in a world where God has designed it such that he uses you to accomplish his purposes. What could there be that would be a higher call than that? And I think we need to tell that story again to men and encourage them and challenge them to become part of it.
I will say, as I took notes and listened to the audiobook a couple of times, there are so many great quotable lines. One of the things I wrote down was self-gratification leads to bondage, not liberty. I feel like this is one of the false statements everywhere today is just give in to whatever is going to make you happy, whatever is going to make you feel good. Then you'll be suddenly self-actualized, realize happiness and all of that. Why is that a path to destruction rather than liberty?
Well, it's a path to destruction because it makes your world small, for one thing. I mean, if your world is all about you and your happiness, then your world is going to get smaller and smaller and smaller as you chase yourself around in circles and try to figure out now what's going to stimulate me, now what's going to get my attention, now what's going to make me happy in this passing moment. Anybody who has spent any time around other people knows that the way you find happiness and fulfillment in life is you give your life to others. You join your life to others. And really more than that, what the scripture reveals to us is you sacrifice your life for others. Our highest form of fulfillment is found in giving our lives away, as Jesus did, so that others can live and flourish. But the reason that now we hear all this preaching from our culture, liberal culture, about putting yourself first is because they've drained our world of any kind of meaning. I mean, again, the message that we're told from the time we're small is the universe is empty. That's what the culture says. There's no meaning out there. The only thing that you can do is just try to make yourself happy in the moment. Oh, that's a recipe for terrible depression, isolation, and purposelessness. And against all of that, I think we've got to tell the real truth, which is that no, eternity is real. God is real. There's a purpose for your life. And if you live into that purpose by living for other people, you can find tremendous, tremendous, not only happiness now, but legacy.
And briefly, I'd love to just kind of pull on that thread of denying the men the dignity of work. If you look back in the past few years, I've seen some of the younger generations that have come up after me. They'll tell you about, oh man, that's beneath me. I don't want to do that. I want something that's going to make me happy. And on the other hand, a response to, say, blue collar workers who their jobs were just taken away. Well, why don't you just go out and learn to code and you'll be fine? I'd love to have you just speak a little more to that dignity of work and just being able to realize that, working is providing, work is a gift. No job should be beneath us if we're fulfilling, providing for ourselves and our families.
As men, we are made to work. What does God tell Adam to do in the garden? He tells him to work. And he tells him that that's going to be how Adam fulfills his mission for God. It's going to be through his work. Now, it doesn't mean we be workaholics or that's the only thing that matters in life, but there's something there that's very profound that I think that we as men need to hear today, which is that our work matters. It has an eternal significance to it. It has a legacy-making significance to give ourselves in work for a cause, for other people, to provide. And that means that, yeah, there isn't a job. If the job itself is done for honorable purposes, then there's no job that is beneath us and that God can't use for good. And so I tell in the book stories of not only folks from the Bible, but people from my own life. My grandfather was a farmer, uncles and cousins who are still farmers, other family members who work blue collar jobs because, you know what, they love it. Number one. Number two, they're good at it. Number three, it provides for their families. And in this country for too long now, because of our leadership class, we've had a culture that really looks down on people who work with their hands and looks down on blue collar workers. And you can see that reflected in our policy. We've sent so many of those jobs overseas, outsourced them, and just told blue collar workers, men in this country, that if you do that, you're really less than, you're not good enough. Why didn't you go to college? Well, we need to be sending the opposite message, which is that we need people who are willing to work, learn a trade. We need people who are willing to provide for a family. And we need an economy where you can actually do that, provide for a family by the work of your hands. So all of those things sit together, in my view. And the message to young men especially is, hey, get out there and work. More young men than ever are not working. That's a disaster. We need to say to men, work is good. It is fulfilling. It is legacy building. And we need you to do it.
And next, I'd love to just pull briefly kind of on that warrior thread. What is at stake when men choose to coddle evil rather than push back on it? I think this is one of the big difficulties a lot of men are facing right now. We are seeing evil and we're being told it's good. We're seeing things that we've always thought were wrong and we're being told, just ignore that. It's fine. Yet in our heart, we know better. And so a lot of us have hard decisions to make. Do we just accept the evil or do we start figuring out how to push back against it? Why is that critical in this season?
It's absolutely critical because if a father won't stand up for his family, for instance, and won't call things evil that are influencing his kids, he puts his kids in danger. If he won't do that for his wife, he puts his wife in danger. If we won't do that for our neighbors, we put our neighborhood in danger. So, we could look right now, for instance, back to the radical transgender ideology. If we just go along and say, you know what, yeah, there's no such thing as men or women. Fine that biological men play women's sports, for example. My view is that that's not only wrong, it's dangerous. It's dangerous for the young women who have that opportunity taken from them. It's dangerous from those who are put in positions of harm. It's dangerous for the kids who are forcibly sterilized. Dangerous. And if we do nothing about that, we have some responsibility for it. But I can make it more personal. Think about it in our own lives. If we don't confront the evil in our own lives, what happens? We give that ground over to more evil and to darkness. So if we look at, hey, I've got an addiction. I need to do something about that. I've got a habit of wanting to please people and tell them what they want to hear. I need to do something about that. Our responsibility to confront evil begins with ourselves and our own hearts. And I think that is maybe the most poignant and powerful message that we as men should hear. Because if we'll do that if we'll get the courage to do that in our lives, then we can do it for other people as well. And we can be men who bring order from chaos and who bring light into darkness.
Another theme that I wrote down that I loved in the book is this idea of sacrificing to see the fire of God in our character. More than when I think of fire, I think of something that's going to be refining. Why do we need to be willing to just push that much further and let God work through and molding and shaping our character? It's a scary thing, probably on the front end of it, but on the other side of it, you'll be thankful you did it.
I think the amazing thing is when you look at the whole story of the scripture and you look at what we're invited to do as followers of Jesus, ultimately, we are given the opportunity to carry the presence of God with us out into the world. And I mean, the Apostle Paul, of course, says explicitly that you are your temple, your body's a temple. Our bodies are temples, dwelling places of God by his Spirit. I mean, think about that. That's an amazing thing. But the truth is, Paul's saying that you get a little picture of that all the way back in Genesis, where Adam is in the garden. What's the garden? A place where God dwells. It's a little temple. What's Adam supposed to do? Expand it. Take the presence of God out into the world. Spread God's glory. That is our ultimate calling as men and women. And as men, I think what that means for us is, listen, we can be people who carry the presence of God with us, power of God, the hope of God, the healing of God, everywhere we go. But that doesn't leave us unchanged. In order to do that, we have got to be willing to lay our lives down for it. We've got to be willing ultimately to give them to God and say, Lord, use me. We've got to be willing to give them over to his purposes. And I got a friend who says all the time, fire falls on sacrifice. And you think about that. That's true. You got to have some kindling, right? To light the fire. Our lives are the kindling. And I think as men, it's like, hey, we've got to give our lives, our time, our energy, our treasure, our resources. We've got to give those over to the Lord in order to be used, to be set on fire so that blaze can spread out into the world, can light the lives of other people and carry the presence of God where we go.
And in terms of the reader's journey with the book, no matter who picks up this book, what's that core message, takeaway, call to action, the one thing you want every single person to get when they read Masculinity?
I want men to know that there's a purpose for your life, that your life can make the world a better place, that your life can change your family's destiny, that your life can leave a legacy. God has called you for a purpose, and we need you. Your family needs you. Your community needs you. This nation needs you. Listen, I can say, I mean, it's my job to represent Missouri in the United States Senate, and I get to work on many issues of consequence for the nation as part of that. It's an incredible privilege. I can just tell you with 100% certainty, this country needs men of purpose who are willing to take on responsibility, who are willing to sacrifice, who are willing to be husbands and fathers. That's what will change this nation. So my message to men is, you matter and we need you.
And I can say in all honesty, I've listened to this audiobook twice. This is going to be one of my top 5 books of 2023. It is just a phenomenal and a really important read for this cultural moment. Josh, in terms of people connecting with you, finding out more about the book, where do we discover you on the web?
You can find me at joshhawley.com. You can follow me on Twitter at HawleyMo. Instagram and Facebook is Josh Hawley Mo. And you can find the book anywhere books are sold, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, any local bookstore.
It's time to bring this episode of the Shaun Tabatt Show to a close. Many thanks for being a part of my conversation with Senator Josh Hawley. Once again, our book today was Manhood, the Masculine Virtues America Needs. And Josh, I want to say thank you so much for sharing with us today. It's truly been an honor and a pleasure to have you on the show.
Thanks for having me.